And I think I'm online. There we go. Good evening, folks. Drew back. It's Monday evening again. It's now the 10th of September. I've been doing this for a few weeks now, which is quite cool. Welcome to my stream, Wagar's on Writing. Tonight we're going to be talking about characterization. So that's all about making believable characters for your books. So I'm quite looking forward to this, Anne, actually, because this is one of my favourite bits of writing, is turning into characters. So first off, who have we got on the stream? So Magnificent Mako, hello. I saw you. Thank you very much for the chant there. We want Drew. Oh, that's quite cool. And Chris, of course, possibly my most loyal follower so far. I think you've been there right from day one, possibly even before, which is fantastic. So thank you very much, guys, for turning up. This is good. What have I been doing this week? Well, oddly enough, I've just come back from my medical with the NHS today, which I passed. I'm really pleased about that. And Daddy Hoggy, hello, sir. Good to see you as well. I passed my medical, which I'm quite pleased about. So my cholesterol is good, and my weight is good, and my blood pressure is good, and all those kind of stat things are kind of good, which is always encouraging. For those of you who don't know, actually, probably you won't. I actually do have a heart defect, which I was born with, so nothing to do with anything I've done. And there's no real danger associated with it, but it's one of those things that I discovered 10 years ago. When they first, I had a fainting fit spell at one point, and they plugged me into an ECG. and they look rather alarmed, which is not very encouraging when you're looking at an ECG. And anyway, it transpired that I've got this strange electrical short circuit in my heart, which means that it beats out of sequence. And I might need a pacemaker when I'm older, but we'll see how it goes. Um, but ever since then, I've got this, this thing with I've got to have medicals at a regular interval just to check things, and I've got to keep my diet regulated and blah blah blah, all the usual stuff. But what's good now, news about today, it means I'm still healthy, which is great, which means I'm hopefully going to keep writing and do cool stuff like this. So that's always quite a nice relief to know that all your medical stats are where they're supposed to be. So, and Mr. Daddy Hoggie's been writing. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to squint. I'm going to have to do something about the fonts on this thing because I can't see them. This is part of the problem getting old. I can't see them from far away from the monitor. I'm just about to start writing a piece of flash fiction if I finish before the... Oh, wow, okay, yeah, no, please do, Daddy. Yes, that would be excellent. Yes, we'll definitely look forward to seeing that. So anyway, so I hope you have all had a good last week. That's the problem with having a stream on Monday, actually. I can't talk about... Last week seems like quite a long time ago now, doesn't it? Whereas if I did it on Friday, then it would be this week that we could talk about. But anyway, so hopefully last week was okay. Yes, it's all been a bit busy and stuff. I mean, it always is. There always seems to be so much to do, and I haven't done as much writing and stuff that I wanted to. Oh, and hello, Alpha Epic 11. Sorry, I'm late. You're in good company, sir. I was late as well. Yes, it's been a bit chaotic this evening, but that's all good. It's all good stuff. Spending time with the family and eating soup that we homemade, which was quite nice. And George R. R. Martin, he's getting a bit old, isn't he? I'm planning to get all my stuff done and dusted. I don't want to be leaving people hanging on my writing by the time I'm kind of getting old. But according to my life expectancy calculations on the internet, I've got about another 30 years on average, so it should be enough to finish most of the stuff I've got on my list at the moment. I'm hopeful of that anyway. So, right, so tonight, characterisation. I thought we'd pop onto this topic a little bit. And at some point, I will get back to doing some critiquey bits of other people's work, but certain topics keep occurring to me at the moment that I'm going to go with my train of thought for the time being. And as you all know, I do ramble a bit anyway. And sometimes maybe there's the occasional gem in the rambling, but we'll see how it goes. But yes, I will do my best to stay healthy and keep writing. That's definitely the plan. But yeah, so characterization. So those of you who read my books will know that most of my stories are character-driven stories. So it's kind of they're almost more like film production type writing than they are driven by events or driven by other various bits and pieces. I tend to get the characters to push the story along. So you tend to see perspectives in my stories by how the characters are reacting to them, what they say, what they do, and all that kind of stuff. But in order to do that, I've had to create the characters. And if you think back over your favourite books and your favourite stories, and or even TV films, television and so on and so forth, if you think back on your favourite characters, you're probably going to, they'll be memorable for one reason or another. So, let's take Star Trek, really obvious example. Mr. Spock, probably my iconic character from Star Trek. What's interesting about him? Well, he's half Vulcan, he's half human, so he's got this split sort of upbringing between the worlds of logic and emotion, which obviously he battles throughout his his time on Star Trek. Data from the Next Generation is almost the reverse. He's got the he wants to be a human, but he's limited by the fact he's an android, and he's trying to discover a way of doing it. So conflict inside a character is quite nice. That makes the character a little bit more interesting. I always must admit I like Captain Picard from the Next Generation most of all the characters, because I like the I really like that kind of leadership style that he portrays. He always seems to be certain, even if he's not sure, which is an interesting trait for a leader. I think he's quite good. So he's complex. He likes a bit of archaeology on the side and things like that when he's not captaining a starship and all that kind of good stuff. If you look in Star Wars, the initial episode New Hope, Luke is a bit not hugely exciting to start with. But the first character who comes along, who I think is a bit more interesting, of course, is Princess Leia, or Leia, or Leia, Leia. I think it's Leia in the films, isn't it? Um, and she's a senator, so she's got political influence. She's somehow a rebel as well. So you're kind of asking yourself fairly early on, well, how does that all work? So she's got a little bit of nuance behind her as well, even from the start. Ben Kenobi's obviously got a secret past, and Han Solo is obviously a smuggler who's a bit dodge, and obviously he did shoot first. So he's a rogue, and those sort of things begin to build up over time as you find out more and more about these characters. Um, if you look at other sci-fi shows like Firefly, I mean, this Firefly really is a master of exploring characterization. Love the fact that you've got a lot of depth to those particular characters. You really feel like you're beginning to get to know them. My favourite character off that, in terms of the characterization, actually is Simon Tam, who I really rather wish I'd written a character like that, because he's got this wonderful kind of hidden agenda, which of course he doesn't reveal to anybody else for quite a long time. And very sad that we didn't get any more Firefly, but very, very cleverly constructed show, even if the premise is a bit daft with the Western in space. But it kind of worked. It actually had a really good cohesiveness to it. And you don't have to stay in sci-fi and fantasy, obviously. I mean, Lord of the Rings, Gandalf, and those kind of characters, very, very interesting. And a book that I've already shown you, Rebecca, by Daphne du Maurier, has got some fantastic characterization in. There's a woman in Rebecca called Mrs. What's her name? I can't remember her. Anyway, she's not really a baddie, because nobody is in that book, but she's just terrifying. And Dan something anyway. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. But these characters make things very memorable. I mean, Darth Vader and all the other villains are quite good. And alas, obviously in the last week we've had Jacqueline Pierce die, which is very sad, from Blake Seven as Servalan. That show was a bit camp, certainly at times, but she was a magnificent villain, in the sense that she was sort of sultry and bad and vulnerable and desirable and ruthless and nasty, and all kind of mixed up. So very memorable characters. You can't say you don't recall them. And I, Commander Terraformer. Yeah, good to see you, sir. And other buttons. Oh, hello. I don't recognise your name, so welcome to the stream. Thank you very much. Definitely Harry Potter. Actually, I mean, for all the criticism that J.K. Rowling gets about Harry Potter, just a general writing, and to be honest, I don't think she's too bad. A good bad character. Umbridge is horrible. She's just like every worst aspect of the civil service and stuff like that, all kind of put together. Some very good characters. I must admit, when I first read Harry Potter, which must have been about 2 or 3 years after it came out and the hype was beginning to sort of settle down to normality, it was settling down there. And I remember just reading Harry Potter and thinking, actually, okay, it's not literature in the grandest sense, but this is a great story, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. And other buttons. I was the one in the wheelchair. Fantastic on all the stories of name to face. Excellent. Well, welcome aboard. I'm glad you're watching the stream. Thank you very much. That's really good to hear. So characters are memorable because they have some very specific characteristics, and you do want your characters to jump out. The last thing you really want as a writer is, stuff like characters are all the same. Characters are a bit cookie cutter and so you've got a whole bunch of errors to avoid. So one of the errors is making your characters very, very bland, so people can't tell the difference between who's who. And the other one is kind of going to the opposite extreme and making them so characterized they become sort of cliches of themselves. So the evil baddie villain who's just bad because the plot requires it. So you've got to be a bit careful of that. Another name there. Thank you. Pagan Pride. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming along. Do introduce yourself. we are a happy band of relatively small numbers of followers on here, which means it's quite sort of intimate and personal, which is good. So do say hello and introduce yourself to everybody else that's around. That's really cool. And glad to hear you're streaming. I would love learning writing for world building purposes. Oh, brilliant. Okay, well, we are sort of doing a bit. We do have a back catalogue of these streams on YouTube. So the link that's on the screen. I'm doing this backwards. That one. YouTube/C/Drew Wagar. I don't know why YouTube puts a /C in it, but I've tried many times to get rid of it, but it doesn't work. So maybe somebody can advise. You can go and see all the back issues of stuff that we've kind of rambled, or at least I rambled on and talked about. So that's the thing. So there's a lot of the villains are quite often memorable, the good guys are quite often memorable, but you don't want to have characters that are kind of a bit humdrum and a bit dull, that people can't tell the difference. And last week I gave us a bit of a critique of where was it? Arthur C. Clarke's book, Rendezvous with Rama. So fantastic science fiction book. Characters, no, he doesn't. In this book in particular, he's the characters you can't really tell the difference between them at all. They all speak the same way. They all say the same sorts of things, and they just have conversations to further the story on your behalf, i.e. the science around it. Not to say it's a bad book, it's a brilliant book, but characterization is not its strong point. So, if you want good characters, you're going to go somewhere else. And characters who, do stuff. And Bacon Pride, I was the one at Fantasticon who kept the squash jugs full. Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. And now for epic role-playing games, I love playing the bad guy. I do actually. I like playing a. I try and I'm not. those of you who kind of met me probably will. Well, actually, I'll throw that one out as a question actually, because do you think I am an introvert or an extrovert by nature? I mean, there's a question for the chat. I'll let you respond to that one. Some of you already know the answer, but that's a question. If you're going to do these kind of characterization, you need to differentiate them a little bit, and we'll go through a little bit of that sort of stuff later on, which is quite good. Thanks for everybody for dropping in. So it's nice to see the chat doing chatty things. And you're playing a sort of villain in Citizen's Elite Encounters. Excellent. Extrovert, I'd say. Okay, extrovert, cool. So actually, just going back to the, I like playing the bad guy, the egocentric type. I must admit, I quite like playing kind of larger-than-life characters in role-playing games. Commander Terraform is going for introvert, and Other Buttons is going for extrovert, so that's sort of 50-50 either way. So, coming clean on that one, I am very much introverted by nature. Very, very much. I've had to teach myself over the years to be extroverted because in order to do some of the things I've had to do, I've had to just figure it out. And that's probably worth a stream in its own right, on nothing to do with books at all. But sometimes you just get stuck in the limelight a little bit, and you have to learn how to cope with it. So I am much more an observer of things than otherwise, and over the years I've had to become extroverted, or at least cope with it. So I'm an adaptive introvert. So that's a really good. I like that phrase. That's really good. An adaptive introvert. Yes, I can cope, but like most introverts, I do need to retreat into my cave on regular occasions to recharge. So, but there we go. So, and broadcasting in front of potentially lots and lots of people on the internet is not really introverted either, is it? So there we go. But like I say, I've adapted over time. But yeah, it's fun to play different types of characters. And sometimes writing actually gives you the opportunity to be people and act in a way that you would never get away with or even be allowed to, particularly in a fantasy setting or a science fiction setting in real life. So, you can use that as a way to explore different things. And RPGs can do the same thing. You can be, and that's part of the fun, isn't it? You can be somebody who you aren't. And just do sorts of other bits and pieces like that. So I'm just keeping up with the chat again here. It's a very, very tiring emotionally and physically. It is actually. You're absolutely right. Trying to project your personality outwards when you're an introvert by nature is actually it costs energy. It's a bit like one of those Star Trek aliens that sort of slurps your life force away. It does wear you out, and you have to retreat and you have to recharge, and you recharge by or at least I recharge by kind of going on a nice long walk with the dog, or just you know, just being quiet, being in front of a huge 8 people. Yeah, I know. Hey, but we're a focus group, aren't we? I am reasonably social, but I get fed up with it after a certain amount of time and get tired. But yeah, I do like to recharge. So a stream about myself would be an interesting diversion. Maybe I'll do that at some point in time and do a potted history of me. I've never done anything like that before. That'd be quite good fun. And but yeah, the thing actually, obviously writing has taught me is that as you're reading my books, you are getting insight into my psyche, I suppose. Uh, which is a little bit strange. So you can't write a book without revealing quite a lot about yourself. So the type of stories I like to tell and the type of characters I have will, reveal presumably my biases and my inclinations and all sorts of stuff if people start analysing like that. Haven't really thought of that. That's quite scary, isn't it? Anyway, yeah, I'm assuming since you're here that you hopefully reasonably enjoy some of that sort of stuff. But there we go. So that's cool. Anyway, and as usual, I'm rambling on and getting distracted. We're 20 minutes in, I haven't even started yet. So let's pop across to a little bit of characterization. So there's a couple of bits and pieces that I wanted to talk to you and talk to the pitfalls about first. So apologies for typing on the wrong screen again. So I came across this link today, which I'll pop up on the screen, which I thought was quite fun. Where's the button? Desktop focus. There we go. So across here, let me get rid of that background at the moment. Is the is the character cliches thing that I came up with, which I thought was quite funny. So you've got the kind of characters that quite often tend to show up in books. So you start off at the top here, the brooding rebel. So you see a lot of these in costume dramas. The kind of mysterious, usually kind of tall, dark, and handsome type who is a bit taciturn, doesn't say a great deal, and he's obviously got some brooding, past that it will be revealed during the series. He disdains company but shows an unexpected sensitive side of the women he loves. How often have we heard that one before? So I'm thinking kind of Poldark here is a classic example of that relatively recently. And a few others here, the femme fatale and the hooker with the heart of gold, the mad scientist, the Mary Sue. We'll do a bit more about Mary Sue later on, actually. She's quite an interesting character. The nice guy who finishes last, the plain Jane who suddenly becomes rather more attractive, the reluctant hero, the rich old bitch, and it goes on and on and on. So trying to avoid some of those is a challenge. And they're only cliches, and a lot of people say you must avoid cliches. Well, sometimes the only reason a cliche is a cliche is because it works, and it's familiar, and it's actually probably quite good. The old Greek stories with heroes and villains and tragedies and all that stuff. The reason those stories still hang together and an awful lot of people still base their character arcs and things off that sort of stuff is because they work. The reluctant hero, the loner who we can all get behind, the kind of down and out who gets good, or the person who battles against insufferable odds and still makes it. We root for characters like that. The tragic past, the hidden past, the hurt character who eventually figures out that they can live in the world. All those sort of things, those bits of conflict and all that sort of thing, they work as story elements. So you've got to be a little bit careful that you don't throw to use a cliche, throw the baby out with the bathwater when you're mucking about with these sort of characters. So, but you do want to, you kind of do want to go through your characters and go, can I just challenge my character? You need to ask yourself a few questions around it. Um, things like, am I just making a femme fatale, for example, because you know I fancy writing one? And depending on the story you're doing, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But challenge yourself. Is this chap just a mad scientist because he's a mad scientist? Why would he be a mad scientist and all that sort of stuff? Um, and it's a good point, actually, Daddy Hog. Yes, Bilbo and Frodo weren't cliche characters when Tolkien wrote those. I mean, that's virtually we're not far off 100 years old for Lord of the Rings now, are we? Actually, no, 1940-ish. 1930, 1940, so it's not that, 80, 90 years now. All those sort of things. And the hero that comes good, goes back to Shakespeare, so and they were more original then than they are now. So you do have to play around with it. And you finished your 75-worder. Oh, well done. It was 1954. Was it published that late? God, I thought it was because he wrote it in. Oh, I'm thinking of The Hobbit. I think The Hobbit must have been earlier. Maybe somebody can look that up. 1954. Is it that late? That's quite a long time. So those are kind of cliches. Now, the one, let's pick out Mary Sue, because she is probably the biggest. And there's a lovely image here. I think this one. You may have seen this one before. Let's just get that one up on the screen. The Mary Sue character. So, where's the actual image gone? There we go. I like this one. I might have to zoom it up. Browser, zoomy thing. There we go. Let's get rid of you. So this is the classic Mary Sue character. So Hobbit, 1937. I thought it was. Yeah, it's quite a long time ago. Mary Sue is kind of the extreme, and she has a male counterpart in Gary Stew, if you've heard that one. So basically, she's a character who's too perfect. And a recent one, actually, of these, rather surprisingly, to my way of thinking, has come from Star Wars, with Rey. In the last film, she's again, in my humble opinion, she's learning the ways of the Force rather too quickly compared to any other Jedi that's kind of gone before, and she gets very, very good at it very, very quickly, and without really much apparent teaching. So how is she managing that? She's a little bit too clever, a little bit too smart, and a Mary Sue character is, it doesn't matter what she does, she wins. She doesn't seem to have to try very hard. She's probably gorgeous. She's probably got the perfect complexion. She has the perfect hair. She has the perfect shoes. She has the money. She has the gadgets. Whatever it happens to be that tells the story, she's got it. And you can't put this sort of character in any kind of real drama, because you know she can't lose. So it doesn't matter what she tries. You go, well, she's always going to win. And an awful lot of people do fall into this trap, particularly when they're writing early on. So, it says there for too perfect, too beautiful, too popular, too powerful, and too talented. She can't be good at everything, so she's just boring because she has no flaws. She can't do anything wrong at all because she's practically perfect in every way. She's sort of Mary Poppins, but without the magic bag. So you don't want a character who everybody goes, oh God, not her again, because she'll just come in and wave a wand and diffuse whatever situation that you're trying to put together. So Mary Sue is one to absolutely avoid. So if your character is always getting out of the situation by some capability that they have, you need to take a look at that and go, this character is probably too perfect, because they can't be an expert at everything. They can't be gorgeous enough to charm everybody. They can't be clever enough to figure something out all the time. They need to work in a team, all sorts of stuff. So that's good. Did I lose something there? It looks like the stream conked out. Apologies for that. It's not giving me an error message at this end at all, which is a bit weird. So, can you guys hear me? Are we still online? Is he back? Maybe somebody in the chat can tell me whether we're still broadcasting. Ah, that's good. Okay, good. Not quite sure what happened there then. So did we drop out? Okay, it looks like something reset or something. I'm getting more technical challenges. I haven't got any error messages here at all during that. So I don't know which bit of my exposition there you missed, but I was basically just lamenting Mary Sue characters. So don't, summary of that, don't write a character that is perfect in every possible way, because it's horrible. There's a variation on Mary Sue, which is author wish fulfillment as well. And this one can be a little bit more subtle than everything else, which is the author basically living vicariously through the novel. And looks like Twitch was being twitchy. Yeah, actually the chat disappeared and then reappeared, so maybe that was a clue. So apologies for that. I don't know. I don't think there's anything I could have done about that. Everything my end looks normal. So so putting a version of you, or an idealized version of you, into a book so that you can interact with kind of with the story as the author. Now, if you're publishing a bit of fan fiction or something, you're not taking it too serious, then that's probably okay. But if you're trying to do it seriously, then you mustn't do that. You really mustn't put yourself in a novel, unless it's a novel about you, obviously. So be wary of this character is kind of me, but under a different name, a little bit taller, perhaps a little bit thinner, a bit fitter and more good looking, and kind of live vicariously through that. So that's not a good thing to do either. So the question is then, if you're going to avoid those sort of things, you want to avoid the kind of general cliches. What do you do? How do you start? Now, I'm not, this is one thing that sort of, I must admit, from my perspective, kind of comes to me as a bit of inspiration. I can just say, the chat has just updated with Daddy Hoggy's 75-word story. I will invite you on the stream actually at some point, Mr. Hoggard, and you can read the stuff out. So let's just have a look at that. A grey ribbon of death stitched to the countryside by neat white thread. Onto this they dart unexpectedly from the gloom, briefly illuminated. Torn by indecision they weave left, then right, but are struck down without remorse. A momentary dull thud is all that marks the extinguishing of their existence. The kites feed upon the bounty. Cautious of the killers, they rise momentarily into the sky and return a moment later to continue their feast. Very nice. You must admit, you do have a talent for short, really, really short stuff. Actually, your is it Planet something, Planet Fiction or something that you do with the 100-word stuff? I can't do stuff like that. So actually, I shall doff my cap to you in that general regard, because those little short sort of stuff bits are very, very clever. So well done. That's good. Yes. So groups, a paragraph planet. That's it. Yes, I knew it had a planet in it. So going back to constructing characters. So you want characters who are good. Going back to one of my earlier pieces of advice, remember that if you're writing a story with conflicting people in it, nobody thinks they're the bad guy. That's the first kind of rule of characters. Nobody thinks, right, I am the evil arch-villain of this piece. Ha 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 ha. Unless you're writing a Disney script. Nobody thinks they're the bad guy. Everyone thinks they're the good guy, and they're doing what they need to do. So you must go and look at your character from the perspective of what are they trying to achieve in your story? Why are they there? What has their part to play in the story? They will be probably trying to achieve something. Now that could be, could be power, could be money, could be domination, could be anything. What is the motivation that they have for doing whatever it is that they're doing? So that's your first kind of piece. What's their purpose? Then you've got to ask yourself a question. Okay, what is? Why are they doing that? What it is about their personality that's led them to the point where they want to do this? What happened to them, previously, that made them want to do that sort of stuff? And what formative influences have they had in their life to make them kind of work that way? So give an example of this, I'm going to go back to some of my work, which I think is only fair, and show you how I've done it, which might help you guys with what's that movie? Thinking about your sort of stuff. So let's go back to Elite Dangerous and Elite Reclamation. And I think I've shown you some of this stuff before. But let's go to the guidebook, because you can download this if you want to. So I sort of summarise this in here for some of my pledge awards and various other bits and pieces. But let's just make that nice and neat and tidy across there. So what I did with this is I sort of summarised the creative process I went through. But let's go down to the characterisation bits. This is a story in its own right anyway, because they're down here somewheres. Lots of graphics. Okay, well, this is a good place. This is where I start. So I'm a very visual author. When I'm writing my stories, I tend to cue off images. So one of the first things I do is, when I'm thinking about characters and various other bits and pieces, is I get some images off the internet and just kind of play around with them. And one of the websites I use actually is Shutterstock. And the nice thing about Shutterstock is that you can kind of browse all the images for free. If you want to buy them and use them, you have to go pay for them. Now, if I can remember my sign-in, he says, hopefully. Let's hope that's the right password. Did that work or not? I don't think it did. Let's try that again. Oh dear. I'm pretty sure that was the right password. I'm out of download. Oh, I'm not logged in. That's good. Okay. So what I can show you on here, this is quite a useful little website. And there's loads of others of them along here. But what you can do is, rather nicely, as you're browsing an image, you can put them into categories. And they call them shadow boxes or light boxes or something. So, for example, here, I've got a category called Elite Reclamation. So when I was going through Elite Reclamation, I was just browsing images randomly, and I was able to kind of put them all together. And you'll probably recognize a few of these. So I'm looking for various images on different kind of things, and there's one that I was just talking about just a moment ago. This one here, which is just a guy in a trench coat with a gun standing in the rain. Now, that one I actually described very, very specifically in Elite Reclamation as a scene. There's a scene, if you remember that story, whereby it's raining at a starport, and there's been an argument, and one of the guys has fallen off the ship, and Dolk Torgun, who ended up being this guy, is standing over him with a gun to his head, saying, "You will do what I tell you, or you're dead," kind of thing. And then you start well, guy, black trench coat with a gun. What's his background story and all that kind of stuff. And if you go back to some of the others here, so I've got a variety of people. This one is familiar. I use this one in some of the promotional material for Elite Reclamation. That's a sort of posh woman in a kind of posh environment. It's vaguely imperial sort of flavour. So I use that to get that sort of haughty, arroganty feel for Kahina, just to sort of start with. So one of my techniques is keying off images. The images, I'm thinking, okay, well, why is she so haughty, and why is she strutting around in this furnished room? What's what's that? So that's why I do these sort of things. So and Pagan Pride, that's that's kind of the idea. So I'm using these images to go, okay, I want to, and here's another one. This is the one that actually I've just referenced. So I actually did buy this one, and that's referenced in here. So Dolk and the band of reclamists, they are tough, brutally sort of people. I was looking at that and thinking, okay, well, these guns are quite old-fashioned sort of things. So why wouldn't they be having kind of laser pistols and stuff in the world of Elite Dangerous? And then I'm thinking, no, hang on a minute, we could set this a bit further out in the universe. The tech maybe out there is a bit old. You're going to use a more traditional kind of firearm because it's reliable and you can get spare bullets for it. Stuff out on the frontier has to be robust and reliable and be able to take a good kicking. So maybe they'll be using old-fashioned guns still out there in that sort of sense. So this kind of gave me that sort of steamy, guys who are pushed to the edge. Living conditions aren't great. It's a bit of a brutal world. It's on the edge of the frontier, and you can see how it starts to kind of generate sort of stuff like that. I had got that kind of dueling tradition flavour in there, and you can see from some of the other images I was playing around with that the dueling thing came back to me quite a few times. So I've got a couple of images here. I didn't actually use this one in the end, but I quite liked it. So you've got a character here with a sword, and she's kind of obviously hopefully knows what she's doing with the sword. And there's that sort of swordy conflict. But why would people be using swords in the 34th century? So there's another question. So you go back from there and go, well, maybe it's a dueling tradition that's maintained as part of the aristocracy, for example. People use dress swords even today. Maybe that thing is still a thing in the 34th century. And then maybe there's a kind of honourable combat thing about it, and you can kind of extrapolate from that. Another one was this one here. So there's Dulk. Obviously, Kahina got killed, so there are a few images of her being sort of dead. And then I had this one, which was quite a fun image of two kind of rather kind of fluffy, air-headed blonde women. And I thought, I can play around with this here, because what I can have is a dysfunctional family. So you start talking about some of the mechanics like arranged marriages and people being, daughters being married off for political purposes, and going, okay, well, what if you were the third daughter of a very, very powerful aristocratic patriarchal family, and you discovered that you were being married off to further some political end? What would you think about that? That starts to inform you. Well, you'd probably be quite resentful, and you wouldn't necessarily want to be manipulated in that sort of fashion. And you may be very frustrated because perhaps you don't have a choice about it because of the way society is structured. All of those sort of things started folding back into the basis of elite reclamation. So those are the sort of things that I was considering as I was building the characters of some of my sort of protagonists. What's the background scenario? What's their family like? What's happened to them in the past? So if we have a look at, again, let's go back into reclamation here, the plus and approval, I think it is. There we go. And we go down here to the characters. So I've written out for each character, and this is all the work I do before I start writing the novel, is what is this person all about? So I've gone from the image that I first originally selected to a bit of a physical description. It's worth doing a little bit of physical description just to make sure you're consistent. What you mustn't do, in my opinion, is to dump it all in the story. There's an awful lot of science fiction books, particularly written by men, actually. It's quite a giveaway, who tend to describe the female characters in a bit too much detail, if you know what I mean. Certain measurements and things like that. You mustn't do that. That just looks horribly naff. Just give enough to differentiate the character from someone else. So I tend to focus on hair colour and eye colour and general complexion, because that is probably one of the things you tend to notice about people first anyway. How tall are they? What colour's their hair? Sort of, because most ladies ignore. Yes, and for good reason, really. They're not usually great. So Kahina, in this case, dark-haired, grey eyes. Grey eyes is a bit unusual. It's quite hard colour. There's lack of colour there. So I deliberately chose grey rather than anything else to kind of give the impression of a hardness to her character just from the physical description. She's strong and memorable, but she's not beautiful. She has two other older sisters who are more admired for their looks. So Kahina is not as good looking as them, trying to avoid that sort of Mary Sue kind of bit. She's fit because she does a lot of physical training, and she has this imperial accent which sounds snobbish and haughty to most ears. And she is bitter and twisted right from the start. So basically, here's her profile. She's the youngest daughter. She has two older twin sisters, and she's frustrated by a pointless life, aggressive and sharp-tongued, manipulative, and with a cutting wit she uses to great effect to the distress of her sisters. So she loves antagonizing her sisters, and she's actually the most intelligent of the three, so she can kind of get away with it. She regards them with contempt because they want to play along with the family plans and do that sort of Mrs. Darcy kind of thing with the marriage. Her father despises her because she is clever and intelligent, and she's a nuisance because he can't get her to to do sort of things. So she's got some problems, and she's stuck in a kind of no-win situation here because she can't get out of it politically. So she's kind of stuck. She's initially very angry. She's insecure, and then eventually she is forced to depend on others to work with in order to survive in a kind of a dangerous world. So that's the kind of starting point for her. So I'm just going to catch up with the chat. How do you go about choosing characters beforehand, before you've even written a plot? Do you write a rough plot outline to determine the kinds of characters you need and then detail them out like this? Yes, so I work the plot out first. And I deliberately try to write the synopsis and the story before I've decided on exactly what the characters are like. The reason I do that is to try and avoid a bit of the guys always do this in the story and the girls always do that in the story. I try and not to determine which gender is involved or which race or creed or anything like that before I've worked out what actually happens in the story. So I try and work it out almost androgynously from the character perspective and make sure the plot works, i.e. is there a good story going on, and then I put the characters kind of into that. So that's how I do that one. And hello, Dark Insanities. Excellent. I love these usernames. I really must get more creative in mine. Hello, B. It was good to meet you briefly at Fantastic. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed Reclamation Privilege. Thank you very much again. Too much multitasking, however, have a look. No problem. It's more than happy to lurk. Nothing wrong with that at all. And yeah, Imperial's so fun to make. They have lots of family issues to work with and lots of power to play with. That is a good point. That's one of the reasons Reclamation was set about the Imperials, because they're just more fascinating. Really just a lot more interesting to play around, because they've got this weird power hierarchy that you just don't get in most political societies at the moment. So they're quite interesting. I think Reclamation was the only book that really kind of featured the Imperials as a primary thing, and I found them a lot more interested in writing for the Federation and the Alliance in particular. So she, Kahina again here, ruthless, but she does eventually learn judgment and a bit of compassion as a result. So she's got a character arc. That's the other thing that's important. Your character starts off in one condition at the beginning of your story and ends up somewhere slightly different. Doesn't have to be better, doesn't have to be improved. It probably just has to be different. They go through experiences during a story, and that alters their character. But you also do have to have a little bit of thinking. Now, I didn't do too much with Kahina and the other things, because I thought at the time I was only writing one book. I didn't have to do too much work. And that's the Dolk one, for example. So he's a man of precision. Each move's calculated. He steps with care and is a practiced fighter. He does not suffer falls. Yeah, he's quite a nasty piece of work in some ways. He's very, very aware of things, but actually he loses his way in the sense that he kind of doesn't. He kind of almost goes around the entire loop in the story and kind of undermines himself. But he's got he's a shrewd and intelligent man with an eye for longer goals and decade-spanning plans. He's clever. He's a mastermind. Very, very good, tactical and strategic person. But he underestimates it and forgets why he's playing the games of power. So you can have lots and lots of fun like that, all those kind of things. So Elite Dangerous was quite good for that kind of thing. I didn't go back into the character's past too much because I didn't need to. We know that there's a family dispute. We know that he's a bounty hunter. I didn't go back and lay out exactly his entire life history. There was no need to do that for this particular story. But in contrast to that, I did have to do that with the Shadewood stuff that I'm working on. So some of this stuff gets revealed in the books, but where's my overview of Shadewood gone? There it is. No, that's not the right one. Shadewood background must be that one. So in this book, and I can't show you all of it yet because it's still spoilers, but if I go down to some of the key characters, so I've had to go back here and go through various bits and pieces, and Kiri is probably one of the most famous characters in here. She's an orphan. She's grown up as an orphan. She's had to fight for her survival from a very, very young age, and that puts her in a particular kind of, as a child she's used to brutality. As a child she's used to hardship and starvation. As a child she is used to people being killed in front of her. So she's learned quite a few things to survive at all costs. Show no mercy because what's the point? Because nobody's going to show you any mercy, and so on and so forth. She's a very, very hard, sharp character, and in order to get the flavour for characters in Shadewood, I kind of did it a slightly different way. I started giving them a quote. If they were to summarise themselves, what would they say? So here's Kiri's quote. Here's Kiri's summary of herself, which is: "The weak are irrelevant, as are the sick and the infirm. Only the strong survive, and that's the way of things. Expect no mercy and give none." That's her outlook on life as the story starts. She basically doesn't expect anybody to help her. She's going to survive on her own wits, and that's the way she treats everybody. And surprisingly enough, that gets her into all sorts of difficulties as she meets and interacts with other characters. By contrast, one of the other characters here, Zoella, is a much softer individual. And her summary is: life is about how we care for others despite the hardships and perils of the world. If we don't care, then we've no purpose being here. And that's her outlook on the world. And that's the lens through which she tends to try and see things. And the reason I wrote those is because what I wanted to do is go back to those statements when we get these characters in a situation together, revisit those statements. Okay, so how's that character going to react true to that statement in this scene? Are they going to just take the easy line out? Are they going to kill somebody? Are they going to do it for self-interest? Are they going to try and help somebody? What are they going to try and do? And get those kind of characteristics out and play those things. So, I start doing that sort of thing. She believes her morals and outlook are the most important part of herself. She tries to make the best of all situations, and she does that at cost to herself. So this is quite a selfless kind of individual. She's got a keen interest in music and poetry. And then there are a few other bits and pieces, and this is a useful little technique. You mustn't overuse it, but it's definitely worth chucking this in every so often. Find some mannerisms. So things that people do. Now, you probably notice me. I tend to tweak my nose sometimes, or I will fiddle with my fingers, or something like that. I do scratch my nose. I've noticed that. I've watched myself on a few videos every so often. People have mannerisms. People do things repeatedly. They will frown, or they'll squint, or they'll scratch their earlobe or something. They'll have something that's quite distinct about them that if you watch, you'll notice. And it's worth sticking those in your stories. So Zoella has a mannerism of holding her head in her hands and hiding behind her hair when she's thinking or in despair. So she'll kind of duck forward, her hair falls forward, she's got longish hair, and she'll just hide there, almost away from the world a little bit. And if you drop that into the story every so often, people will get used to, oh yeah, Zoella, she's, and you can just drop them, the characteristic classical yeah. I'm terrible for ums, actually, particularly live. I try and avoid it when I'm doing other stuff, but yeah, it's awful. But people have very distinct things, and people get used to that, and when it's not there, they miss it. So there's there are little things like that. So give your characters a mannerism. So if you look in my fan fiction prior to Elite, you'll notice the lady there, Rebecca. She's got a mannerism. She bites her lower lip when she's thinking. It's quite simple, but if you go back and read those now, you'll notice it. You may not have noticed that on the way through. I think what did I do for Salome? Kahina. I think I put her. She runs her hand through her hair and pushes it back away from her ear. That's a mannerism. Other things, in the case of some of the other characters, there'll be slightly different things. Mannerisms are really, really quite useful because they're quite subtle if you don't overdo them, and they will cement the character into your readers' minds quite well. Oh yes, you can tell almost what they're thinking. It's almost like a sort of sigh or a we hear it again, the eye rolling or the pushing back of the hair or the scratching of the nose or the chin, all those sort of things give your characters a distinct. There we go. And listen a minute. I've probably just done one there. That was pretty bad. So all those sort of things are quite distinct, and make your characters different to other sorts of things. And particularly if you've got quite a big cast. So if you look at Shadewood here are my main characters up here, the ones that kind of play the biggest part in the story, and here are kind of the supporting cast. Now there's quite a lot there, and that's by no means a long list compared to some books. If you're going to introduce a lot of characters into your stories, you need to make them quite distinct. So that's a thing. Then you need to do things like we discussed in dialogue the other week about making them talk in a different way. Make some of them use contractions, make some of them be verbose, make some of them be not verbose, and so on and so forth. All those things are quite important. But it is worth working out why your character is the way they are. What happened to them before your story that you're telling actually happens? Do a little bit of a character bio. Sometimes it's worth doing, particularly if they're quite young. Take them back to their childhood. What happened to them in the intervening years before your story starts? That made them the way they are. So these two, Kiri and Zoella, are quite distinct. Kiri has actually led a really, really hard, sharp life. She's cheated death on many occasions, and she's barely even grown up. Zoella's life has been a bit easier, which has affected the way she is. And those little things are quite different. Now Muru here is another character. Now he's a bit sort of almost on the autistic spectrum. He's very focused on what he's trying to do, and if anybody's getting in his way, well, he's just not interested. I've got science to do. And his quote here: "Technology holds the promise of improving everybody's life, and the richest, the poorest. If only people would overcome their prejudices and just get on with it." He just doesn't have time for all this emotional junk. He just wants to let's do the science. Let's figure out the answer. Let's solve the problem. So he's quite a man, really. That emotional stuff. We don't do that. Let's just fix the problem. He doesn't want to. Doesn't want to mess about with trying to solve people's being upset about things. Just solve the problem. And those kind of character traits can kind of come out. None of those are good. None of those are bad. That's just how these things have worked out. Now he's also quite naive. He's lived a fairly sheltered life up until this point. He's had good food. He's had accommodation. He hasn't had to worry about where his next meal's coming from. He's always had things at his disposal, and that's how he's used to living his life. So of course he's completely different again to the other characters in the story. So those contrasts are really, really important. You do want characters who, when they meet, they may have some things in common, but an awful lot of stuff they just will not see the same issue eye to eye. So if you take a scenario where something's happening, characters must react differently, or come at it different ways. And depending on the type of character you write, and depending on the reader who's reading your story, some readers they'll kind of tend to gravitate towards one character, and other readers will tend to gravitate towards another because they've got something in common more with one character than the other. Now you, the author, don't know which way around that's going to be. So you're just trying to write lots and lots of different things about those characters to try and make them appeal to different types of people. Just going back through this. Counted less 5 ums and less than it. Yeah, I know, I'm terrible. Sorry about that. Remember reading Lord of the Rings the first time? After the first chapter, I had to write a list and short description. Oh, Lord of the Rings. It's a nightmare, particularly all the elves and the kind of genealogies and stuff. It's almost like reading the Bible, all those characters in there. It's a bit hard to keep up, I must admit. And sometimes it's worth having a kind of read. Anne McCaffrey, who I adored as a writer, did get a little bit bad at that towards the end. There's so many people, almost too many to kind of keep track of. And if you can't keep track of them in your head and you're always going back to an appendix, I think that tends to pull you out of the story sometimes. So do be aware of having too many. It depends, again, what story you're trying to read. When my writers group read the last draft of Endless Possibilities, which is very good, by the way, John, you must get it published, they pointed out that James is just a bad guy. Why is he bad? I knew, and still know, but it's not in the story. And your protagonist is only as good as your antagonist, so I had to fix this. Yes, so, if you've got a bad guy, and you've worked out why he's a bad guy, for God's sake, put it in the story. um, yeah. And then some characters have different names for the same character. Well, yeah, they're going to refer to different people. I mean, I had that in the Elite Reclamation. Dolk goes by more than one persona, depending on who he's interacting with. So you do need to telegraph that a little bit for the reader as well and make it work. But yeah, so that's those little complexities you can kind of play around with if characters have ego. And if you've got a duplicitous character, a character who is deliberately being awkward, it's not telling the truth for the benefit of the other characters or part of the plot, then that becomes very, very more important, because your reader is going to be trying to second guess what the character is saying. So it's very important they stay consistent with the way they've been created. If they are a liar and you've written them and created them directly that way, or they're just somebody who likes manipulating things, then you need to kind of bake that into the way they are. Those sort of things are quite important to keep right. So to go back over that list, so avoid the tropes if you can, avoid the cliches, but don't avoid them religiously. You may be able to kind of pinch bits from the cliches, because cliches work. That's one of the reasons why cliches exist. If they weren't good, they wouldn't be cliches. Avoid the Mary Sue, and avoid the kind of author version of the Mary Sue as well. Do work out a character's backstory prior to the story that you're about to tell. What got them to where they are now? Did they have a horrendous problem in their youth? Have they had quite a happy childhood? What's going on? What's the situation they're in just before your story starts that kind of is going to inform how they enter your first scene? So I made a very conscious decision with Elite Reclamation that the first time you see Kahina, she is awkward, irritating, rude, obnoxious, and kind of generally unpleasant. The idea being that you're going, is this the bad guy or the good guy? And I deliberately left it very ambiguous for quite a while, as to who is the antagonist and who is the protagonist in this story. Because and interesting enough, I've gone through the critique and stuff over the years that I've received for Elite Reclamation, and I've had the critique that Kahina is a Mary Sue character. People have said that. Now, I don't agree, but they're entitled to their opinion. But I've also had the critique on Kahina that she's a thoroughly unpleasant character, universally unlikable, and bumbles from one thing to another and is always getting things wrong. So that's two totally independent reviews of the same character by presumably different people. And is she a Mary Sue, or is she just a ghastly, horrible character? People will react to things in different ways. So it's quite interesting to see how people react to your characters. One of the most popular characters from Reclamation, actually, other than Kahina, was Luco, who's my sort of slightly cliched kind of Italian dude who sort of sweeps in and tries to rescue things. He had quite a complicated backstory because I had a lot of fun creating him, but he's got a relatively small part to play in the story, but he resonated a bit with folks. They kind of really liked him. What you never see is a book with two characters the same, but the same character with different names is interesting, because the names they have been given tells a lot about the relationship between the groups. Yes, so how characters refer to each other is important. Some people will refer to each other by first name. You may notice that when people are being a bit offish and aggressive, they will quite often refer to you or refer to characters by the last name. So, for example, if someone comes up and goes, "Drew, how's it going?" Da, 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 it's probably a relatively informal, pleasant conversation. If someone comes up and goes, "Wagar," I'm kind of probably a little bit defensive or by guard, thinking, where's this person coming from? What do they want? So you can be quite aggressive just by the choice of name you choose. And obviously, if you use something derogatory, then that sets a tone for a different type of conversation. As Mad Dog would usually come up and say, "Writer McRighty face." which is which is my other online nickname now. Um, and yeah, I'm sure other people have used choice adjectives as well along the way. But so and you can use that in your as you build your characters. How do your characters talk to each other? That's quite interesting too. And so every time I started to think Kahina was Mary Sue and likable, she did something selfish or childish or rash. No, well, and that's kind of the thing. She makes a lot of mistakes quite deliberately. She is young and inexperienced. She is quite clever, um, but she's also rather single-minded and not very good at listening to advice and reading the situation. It's the kind of way I put her together. So she does mellow over the years, as hopefully you've seen. But she makes some bad calls, and that's deliberate. You don't want to have a character who gets things right. So she precipitates that massive conflict, the space battle at the end of the book, and only after about 2/3 of the battle does she suddenly have the kind of self-realization that her decisions have just killed thousands and thousands of people on both the Imperial and the Federation side, which is she's so wrapped up in herself and her desire to get her planet back that she actually doesn't care up until that point, and then she realizes what she's doing. And then that's the thing that leads into the next scene, which is all about she'll actually wants to kill Dolk not because she wants to kill him, but she wants to stop any more kind of bloodshed. That's what she's actually trying to stop at that point in time. She'd rather die herself than allow the conflict to continue. She just wants to stop the fighting. So she basically forces the point. That's the way I designed it anyway. You may read something different into it. And all those sort of things. So all those things are kind of consistent. Now, if your character must be consistent and must only change every so often. One of the things that I love and don't like, if you like, about Star Trek is particularly in the original, the original series. Captain Kirk would always have the speech, and towards the end of the episode, he'd give the speech, and some of the bad guys would go, "You know what, Captain Kirk? You're absolutely right. I'm going to change my character and become a good guy, and we'll finish the episode up in a good 45 minutes." Doesn't happen very often in real life. People may give good speeches, but people don't often change their mind. More often, people will get even more entrenched in their opinion and find ways to justify. That's reality. So try and make your characters consistent. It may be that they can give a good speech and they can give a rallying call. People don't change that fast, in my experience. But so try and make your characters not just change for the sake of the plot. Sometimes characters will just sort of dig their feet in and go, "No, I'm not going along with that." I had an example of that with Kahina. Luco tries his best to say, "Look, this is a bad idea. We do not want to go back. If you go back there, you're going to precipitate a war." And Kahina basically goes, "Yeah, and it's my planet. I don't care. Armies are there to fight wars. That's what they're for." She has no thought of all the lives she's about to put at risk. And Luca basically says, "I'm not going to fight your war for you. I'll take you back, but that's it. I'm not going to fight your war. I'm not going to have that blood on my hands. That's going to be your blood on your hands." And she goes, "Yeah, I don't care. I'm an imperial royalty. That's what I do." And it isn't until she's actually started the fight that she actually has the realization that maybe that's not such a good thing to do. Kahina was a childish snob. She was, exactly. By the end, I was starting to like her. She begins to learn a little bit of humility, and she's got enough of that by the end of the story that she's starting to think of things other than herself. She's childish, and she's given a slight naivety by the fact that I took away her memory in the story as a mechanism to kind of tell the rest of the story of Reclamation. That was a mechanism I used. And people, that's a good point actually. Alpha Epic character development in real life. People copy each other. They do. They take cues off each other. You notice a lot of people will adapt their behaviour depending on who they're with. I find myself doing it. You probably do as well if you look at yourself. In certain company, you behave a slightly different way, and depending on the type of personality you are, if you've got somebody who is tries to blend in or tries to get along with things, your natural diplomatic kind of tendency to mould your character to someone else. So you can have kind of, if you like, characters who are different levels of strength. Some people are very, very consistent and will just be themselves regardless of the social situation you're in. Some people will morph and adapt, and those are little tweaks and things that you can add to your characters to make them a little bit more interesting. And Game of Thrones is very good for that. So if you example, there's some excellent characters, and I can't remember the names of them. Actually, let's have a quick look. Maybe I can point out the one that I really like. Game of Thrones characters. There we go. Because I think they appear at the top of Google. It's probably a coming. Here we go. Look. So these guys. Where's the one? These guys that I really like. This guy, Peter Baelish. I mean, who knows what the hell side he's on? He's a good character because you've got you know you can't trust him, but you know what's his agenda? What's he trying to do? And his counterpart is where's the other guy? The bald chap. This guy, Lord Varys. I mean, those two are some of the most interesting characters for me because they are so kind of okay. So what's their angle? All that sort of stuff, and they're kind of adapting and they're playing the politics and all that sort of stuff. That's quite clever. I like characters like that. They're quite interesting. And having that pantheon of different characters is quite good. But make sure each one has got a reason for the way they are and what they're doing. Those two play off each other. And actually having counterparts and like that is good. I use that in Reclamation. You probably may have mind I had two politicians, Geraint and I can't remember the name of the other guy now. How appalling is that? What's his name? Geraint and Zaire. That's right. So I had a duo in Reclamation who kind of bounce each other off. They're quite useful for telling the story of the book and explaining some of the politics that's going on. So you get some of the nuances of the stuff that's happening in the background that I wanted to get out of the background lore. So stuff like that is quite good. Have characters that are kind of naturally gravitate towards each other, but are maybe two sides of the same coin or something like that. The comedy duo or the two people who hate each other but are kind of stuck for mutual convenience, all that sort of stuff is a powerful mechanism that you can use as well. The other little bit to chuck in is there's nothing wrong with using your own experiences into a character. So if, lots of us have been through difficult times. Hand on heart, I've had, I've lost friends and I've lost family, so death I've experienced relatively closely. I lost a friend in a car crash when I was young, who I went to school with. Things like that sit with you through your life, and you can use them, to inform your writing. Many of us may have been, bullied at school, or had very, very difficult family environments for whatever reason. Those are all things that you can bring to your writing and express them through that. That's powerful stuff because it's genuine, a genuine experience that you've had. You'll find that even if you use bits of it in a character, then you will there'll be a compellingness to it that people will notice because you're putting your actual real emotions into an aspect of the character that you're generating. So don't discount that. Again, how much of it you want to use, entirely up to you. But those things can be very, very powerful. I had an experience of fainting, well, worse than fainting, kind of going unconscious once, and the disorientation and the kind of brain fog and the psychological impacts of what happened to me at that point. I remembered so distinctly. I wrote it down a few weeks later, and I did eventually use it in a story. And a lot of people have commented on that scene, saying, "Well, that's amazing. How did you get that insight?" Actually, it kind of happened to me, and that stuff is quite powerful. So if you can bring aspects of things to yourself, put them in, let them work through some of the characters you have. That's quite interesting. Other buttons. A lot of writers say, "Write what you know." Would you agree? Then this phrase is one I don't like because I think it's too prescriptive. So I say, no, write what you can find out about. Because I had a big hang up when I started writing about actually writing female characters. So, well, I'm a bloke. How can I write a female character with any degree of surety that I'm doing a good job? And I was a bit paranoid about this, and you know, it was a big hammer. I can't write a female character, and so I thought, well, hang on a minute. I know some women. I'm going to write the character how I think it will work out, and just give it to them and say, well, does this character come across correctly from your perspective? And with a few tweaks that they kind of offered in, and I've folded those into experience over time. What I've been told now is from very, very many female readers of my books, your female characters are perfectly reasonable. They're great. They work well. So I was completely kind of a bit paranoid about this. And if you stick to write what you know, there's an awful lot of things that you can't possibly know, at least not firsthand. So write what you can figure out. Yes, maybe. But there's an awful lot of things you can never, ever know. I can't figure out exactly what it's like to fly in a spaceship, for goodness sakes, None of us are going to do that, unless we're really, really lucky. So, we have to use our imaginations. Do your homework, do some research, check it out with a few other people, get some critique, yes. But write what you know. No, I don't like that phrase. I prefer to just say, no, write what you can come up with. Don't constrict yourself. Don't constrict yourself. And thanks for Terra Firma. Yes, I did comment about that before, so that's a good one to just go back and do again. Have not lost consciousness, however, scary thing is loss of breath and not being able to inhale after falling back. Yeah, stuff like that really freaks you out. It kind of gives you oh my God, I'm mortal kind of perspective on life. So, all sorts of things you can use to, breathe a bit of life into your characters. And if they're personal experiences, so much the better, because you can use that. The fear you feel when you're about to give a presentation, or the butterflies in the stomach effect when you've got an important decision to make, all that sort of stuff. And I can't understand that a lot. I guess write what you know, but not just what you know. Yeah, I mean, if you know something, yeah, go for it, because you might be the only person in the entire universe who has that perspective. But don't let it limit you, because don't go feel you can't explore something just because you're not an expert or you don't know about it. Women can write perfectly believable male characters, and men can write perfectly believable female characters. For example, you may want to get certain details right. You may want to check it out with people, but don't be scared off by those sort of things. That's kind of important. So anyway, we're at 1:15 already. So I've done my hour and a bit, and I was supposed to do 8 to 9. Is the way these things work out. But I must admit, I enjoy wittering away. Hopefully you enjoy it too. So let's just summarise then. So avoid the cliches, but don't religiously avoid the cliches. Some of the cliches actually work quite well depending on the story you're working for. Avoid the Mary Sue and the author's cousin of the Mary Sue. So don't make a character that you can't put in jeopardy. Really, really important. Your character must be able to get stuck, and and not be able to figure their way out of it. You want to avoid the kind of heroine always gets rescued by the dashing hero as well. So don't put your character in a position where somebody's always rescuing them, because that's a bit naff and a bit weak. Sometimes maybe they can think their way out. Maybe sometimes they get stuck. Work on those kind of things. Combinations of characters work really, really well. So getting them to work as a team sometimes is quite good, and play around with those kind of things. Use the mannerisms. So come up with something that your character does out of habit, and put that into the story. Don't overdo it, but put it in there a little bit. A sigh, or a wink, or a scratch, or a tweak the nose, or an put the ums in. Anything like that is quite good to just differentiate your characters. Little mannerisms really, really help. Do put a little bit of description in about what the character's like. Don't overdo it, because your readers will have their own version of what they want the character to look like in their head. A lot of people have talked about gender balance and things in stories. That's one thing, and race and creed and colour and all those other sort of things. I leave that entirely up to your imagination, how you want to imagine these characters. So I don't prescribe kind of anything big on the description, like skin color or any other bits and pieces to it. I let you kind of figure that out for yourself. So I minimize the description, other than a little bit just to distinguish characters. Hair color I quite like because it's kind of everybody can have lots of different colors of hair, and eye color is quite a distinctive thing that you may notice as you talk to it. Other than that, rough height, rough shape. That's about it. I don't go, well, they've got a hooked nose and they had a long scar on their face, or they walked with a hunch, or they were 6'4", or figure that out for yourself. When I say they're tall, you can come up with what you think tall looks like. So find a balance between getting across what the person is like, and not overplaying it, leaving a lot of that to the reader's imagination. So those are the kind of things about it. The key trick there, again, make the characters distinct. And if you can go back and have a look at the character, if I was going to meet that character, what would be the few things I would take away from them? Would it be, they've got quite an intense stare, or they look like they're a little bit unhinged, or he looks like he can probably handle himself in a fight, or she is. She's very pretty and beautiful, but she's obviously using that to hide something else. She's actually much smarter than she looks. She's a bit self-deprecating. All those sort of things. What's the impression that you want your reader to take away from the character as a first impression? And then see if you can engineer the character to kind of give that impression in the story. So all those sort of things you can play with, and then you can tweak them a little bit later on as you're maturing your characters. So that's quite good. I have a character that pulls out a little block of wood and starts making a little figurine, usually when he's thinking of that. That's a great idea. Yep, I like that. That's quite good, because you can then continue to create the piece throughout the story, and maybe the finished product has some significance that will actually reveal something to the reader, or not. That could be quite interesting to play with. He was a lanky bugger. Long arms, long legs. Yes, very good. Because I was quite vague on one of my second characters in this possibility, I was able to change the gender in one of the edits with very little impact on the rewrite. That's good. I did a similar thing actually with Reclamation. Hassan and Kahina were different genders in the first draft. And then I just found it didn't work, because the arranged marriage thing was actually a lot easier to do with a woman than it was with a bloke, just because of the way the Imperials were set up. So, but if you can swap the genders around, I think that means you've got a fairly well-balanced character where the gender isn't a defining attribute, which is probably a healthy thing to be anyway. And I guess in society we'd often notice social and economic status about said person. Often the first question you get asked when meeting someone is name, work, and education. Absolutely right. So what do you do? Is the first question. I quite often putting random answers to questions like that. What do I do? All sorts of things. So be a bit vague, and where you've grown up, and accent's another one, because that can betray where you come from and your social standing, all those sort of things. People will make assumptions about your character from there on, which you can allow to be true, or you can allow to be misleading, and then that can inform it. So characters should be unique. Characters should be built up and revealed throughout the story. Don't do it all in one kind of go. It's a big kind of info dump. Just reveal little snippets about what they're like and how they react. And you can kind of play around with all those sorts of things. There's, again, a bit like the description, a bit like the dialogue. There's lots and lots of nuances in characterization that you kind of play with. And again, the only way to get good at it is just to keep doing it. But so do have fun playing with characters around in stories like that. It's quite fascinating. I love just sitting around trying to invent characters and then writing a little bit of dialogue and seeing how they turn out, because it's a sort of weird, magical sort of bit about writing, that these things sort of come to life and sometimes surprise you when you're writing. That's the weird magic about it. And even for me, who's an absolute plotter, who I like to work out exactly what's happening in the story, occasionally the characters will still come up with, and I'm thinking, oh, that was weird. Which strange buried bit of my psyche did that bizarre comment come out of? Or, ooh, you're nasty. Why are you doing that? Sometimes they just surprise you because your brain is obviously doing something a little bit tangential. So you can definitely find some surprises in that kind of stuff. Anyway, so I hope that was, again, a useful diversion into the world of characterization. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense as well along the way. And as I say, it's good fun to be chatting with you guys on the stream as well. Question: do you ever write characters and hold them, not for a specific role, but thinking maybe you can use them in the future? I do actually. Yes, I've got a backlog of characters that I'd like to use in various stories, but I haven't necessarily found a place for them. There are a couple in that were kind of built for Reclamation. I actually ended up pulling back out because I decided I had too many, and so they're still in storage or stasis or something, kind of waiting for a story to happen. Sometimes you just create things and they kind of wait there. Yeah, people can definitely be interesting. For that. Thanks for the live stream. It's fun as always. Hope to see you next week. Yes, we'll be back next week. Cryo storage. Yes. Some of what you said I already do. Good. Yes. Well, obviously on the right track then. Others never thought of will likely use in future. That's good. Well, I mean, I pick up ideas from you guys as well, which is good. Spare characters is the reason Neil Gaiman wrote the Ocean. Okay. Yeah. So you've got some characters to use up, then find a place for them to sit in. That's interesting as well. I must admit, I wanted for quite a long time to write a book about a disaffected sort of political woman, and Reclamation ended up being that sort of story, which was quite good fun. So I got to do one of the things I wanted to do in that case. So that's good. Anyway, I will sign off at that point because it's definitely getting way past my bedtime. So, and I've still got work tomorrow. Never mind, eh? But thank you very much, everybody. That's been a really, really good chat tonight. So that's fantastic. I'm not quite sure what next week's topic's going to be at the moment. I will announce that at some point during the week. We'll see how we go. But it'll be another thing along the same lines of sort of stuff that we're talking about now. So I will see you soon. And thank you very much for being on the stream. And again, I will upload this to YouTube shortly. So if you want the links for that, then YouTube and Facebook writers page. The links for which you can find underneath here, I think. There they are. So at Drew Wagar on Twitter, for some strange reason, /C/Drew Wagar on YouTube, and /Drew Wagar Writer on Facebook. So one of those hopefully will work for you. And or you can just go to my website, which I will put a streaming page on at some point. I've got that on my list of things to do. So we'll do that as well. So again, once more, thank you very much, and thank you very much everybody on screen, and particularly the new folks as well who've just popped up. A few new names tonight, which is excellent, and thank you for those who met me at Fantasticon. It's really good to see you as well. So take care, all of you, and I will see you next week. Be good, and right on. So I think we're sticking for the time being, aren't we? Until something new comes up. So we'll see you soon. Take care now, guys.